Well, we've just heard two excellent talks on how to prepare your papers, how to write a paper, how to get it ready to submit to a journal. And as both of them said, the style is going to depend on the journal, the guidelines. And even though Dr. Klasing did not like to follow guidelines, he openly admitted there are guidelines that must be followed. And so I'm going to give you the perspective from the editor-in-chief, from the section editors with the journal, and most importantly, the people that make the decision on your paper, the reviewers. You are writing to convince the reviewers that your paper should be published. Their reviews tell me whether they agree or don't agree, and I'll make the ultimate decision. But if you're not following the guidelines, you're going to lose the reviewer, and it won't get published. And we don't allow rejected papers to be resubmitted to the journal. Once gone, goodbye. You'll have to go to another one. Okay, so I'm going to repeat just a couple of points that the two previous speakers did, and I'll get more into what the journal's looking for. Okay, we've heard some of this, but I still think it's important. If you're going to submit a paper, we're talking poultry science, so what is the problem? Obviously, we're talking about poultry. What is the problem in poultry? In Brian's JAPR, it's a different problem than I would be looking for in poultry science. Probably a scientific problem. What are you looking at? What did you do? What's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the question you're asking? What is the hypothesis that you're trying to prove or disprove? It's important, and I'll get more into that in a minute. That question. We've heard a couple points here where maybe you don't need a hypothesis, but you need a question. You have to be asking some question. The other point I want to make here is sometimes you are asking too many questions for a single paper. And then when it comes to the results, you forget the questions you asked, and you're only showing me a third of the data. You're showing the reviewer. But you asked 3 questions. Ask one big one. Get the data together. Then maybe you can ask that second one, or wait for the second paper or third paper like Dr. Klasing just said. Split up the papers if you have to. That question is there. The other point I want to emphasize in terms of redundant. You see in the medical literature all the time where the same experiment is done in a mouse, and a lab will say, I'm going to do it in a rat. And the next guy says, I'm going to do it in a guinea pig or a rabbit, and maybe work their way up to human. That is redundant. Why would you expect a different mammal to respond differently? Redundancy with our work is, why are you doing the same experiments that's been published in poultry for years? Find a new question. If you have a question that you don't believe that data that is valid or didn't have the technology to answer the question correctly or fully, okay. But don't reinvent the wheel. The data needs to be relevant. And we were talking here just a minute ago. When you're doing your literature and you're doing your literature search, science didn't start in 2010. So your literature search should not begin in 2010. Yes, you do have to go back before you were born to find some literature on the subject. That is valid data. There's stuff that was done in the 50s in poultry and immunology that if I didn't cite today, my papers would be rejected because of the work that was done 60 years ago. Yes, you have to go back and do a literature search that covers the science of that topic, and it's valid. The techniques they used may not be what we have today, but they sure as shit found the data, which is amazing in its own right. So make sure you do a literature search that covers everything. Okay. Obviously, when you're getting ready to submit to Poultry Science, JAPR, or any other journal, formatting is important. What we have begun to do with Poultry Science is the section editors will look over your paper. If it doesn't fit within the formatting guidelines that's provided to you online in the instructions to authors, we will send it back to you and ask you to revise it before it will go out for review. A year ago, we were rejecting those, but I thought that was a little bit harsh. But that takes time. The paper's going back. You have to go back through the process before it goes out for review. Follow the guidelines and format correctly. That is every component of the paper, including the literature cited, which everyone seems to get wrong. I'm sorry that you do have some storage thing of your literature in one form and the journal asks for another. Format it correctly or it's coming back. From what I understand, the journal, we don't do it. Elsevier has the ability to do it. My experience with Elsevier in the last 2 years is that they may not do it, and it'll still come back to you, especially in the proofs. And you will see when you get proofs back, they're asking for the proofs back in 2 days. If you have to reformat it at that point in time, you probably were better off doing it in the right format in the first place. But I think they do. We don't worry about it. Okay? English. Obviously, and you were in the business meeting yesterday, we have 3,000 submissions, planning on 3,000 submissions this year in poultry science. Over half are going to be from non-English speaking countries, okay? We have, and I don't think it's on the website, but we can get it on the website. Elsevier provides an English editing service to non-English speakers. It is an instructional thing, and then it will help you properly write for the English, okay? Usually, if you don't follow that, we will send it back to you to use it as revised, but I'll have to check. I don't think it's on the website, and I think it should be, but it's an important thing that you can use, and it's free. I've heard of other editing services around the world, what they charge, right, Sergio? You said that in Brazil is very expensive. This is free, okay? So that's important. We are getting a lot of papers, and I know my predecessor was really ticked about this. We get a lot of papers they want to have equal authorships. Well, the citation services don't list equal authors. The senior author is the only one that gets listed. The question we always have is, how do you have equal authorships if it's a grad student doing the research? We help. We collaborate. Equal authorships, I'm not as worried about it, but realize only one author is getting cited in the indexes, not two. I don't know what you're gaining other than people see that co-authors when they actually read the paper. Remember that Poultry Science is in an international journal. That means the relevance needs to be international. If you are doing some sort of survey in your part of the world, great. But what's the relevance to the industry worldwide? If it's not there, we will probably send it back and ask you to add some discussion point on that relevance internationally. That's tough in some places because you're talking about maybe some special breed of bird, et cetera. How does that apply to the industry worldwide, not just to your area or region? Okay, so think about that when you're writing. Remember, we're poultry specific. You wouldn't believe the... I got an email about 2 weeks ago telling me the definition of poultry includes rabbits. We said no, it does not. Not in our view of poultry science, and had to send it back. Okay? Okay. Some tips, some steps for success for the journal. Again, follow the instructions to authors. They're there for a reason. It will make the process quicker, which is one of my goals and has been, is to make sure papers that come in get processed, get reevaluated, get reviewed, get back to you, and get published quicker. And we have been doing that. It works a hell of a lot quicker if you follow the instructions right from day one. The process goes a lot smoother, and we can get your paper published sooner. Okay. We've heard some of this already, the introduction. I prefer that you have a hypothesis, if not a question. The reviewers have consistently tell me they read the abstract first to see what the overall thing is. They will then go to the introduction to get the hypothesis. They'll then go to materials and methods to see how you did it. If you don't engage them at that time, guarantee you're going to piss them off, like Dr. Klasing said, and your reviews are going to be poor. Not necessarily rejection, but a heck of a lot of revisions. You want to make the reviewers happy. You're telling a story, as we just heard. You want to engage that reviewer. They're spending volunteer time to read your paper. You have to convince them why you think your work is important, that they should spend their time. And those reviewers are doing the journal a service in terms of, we want quality papers. That quality starts with them and extends to you. If you don't follow these steps and guidelines, it's not going to get there, and we're going to have problems, okay? As I said, the hypothesis, one of the things that was obvious in the discussions but wasn't clearly stated was critical thinking. You have data, and you have to get that data out to people. You have to explain. That means critical thinking. What does it mean? What has been shown before, lit review? Why is this important? Okay? Why is it different? One of the things you see in the instructions to authors, and one of the things reviewers are cued into, what's the novelty? It doesn't have to be earth-shattering. What makes it new? I talked about redundancy. If it's the same thing, they're not going to take it. They're not interested. It's boring. You're doing work that's exciting to you. We'll get that across. That means critically think, what makes this new? And I'll talk about in the discussion point, one way of expressing that. Materials and methods. I can't emphasize enough to provide details and details and details on every aspect. Too many papers come in and say, we followed this procedure. And unless, who was at the coccidiosis conference yesterday, unless you're a coccidiologist and everyone knows Johnson and Reed, there aren't that many damn papers out there that everyone knows. That means we need at least the phrase, briefly, we did this, and then give the citation. You don't have to write 3 pages. Briefly, blah, 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 put the citation. That's a detail. They're important, okay? Controlled experiments. Now, Brian, the JAPR probably takes less control. We demand a control. If you don't have a control, the reviewer's going to junk it right away. Have to have the proper controls, which means you have to think while you're doing the work, not by the time it gets to your writing. Okay? All papers to both journals require IACUC approval. We will send it back if it does not. You have to have IACUC procedure, or we have the animal rights people down on top of us. So I don't care what institute you were at. I don't care if it's government or an academic. We've had papers from private laboratories. They can't get IACUC approval, and we can't publish the paper. Okay? Absolutely vital. Boom. It's got to be there. You got to provide the number. Analysis, the statistical analysis, our reviewers are cued in. It drives me nuts, too, that they want more statistics than I'm willing to give, but that's the rules of the game. This is something that is becoming more frustrating to the reviewers. A lot of people are using kits and antibodies that they have not provided the background data, i.e. a citation, that has been proven to be effective and works for chickens. I'm an immunologist. I see umpteen papers from all over the world talking about measuring cytokines. Here's the company that we bought the kit from. One, I can't find I can find the company, but they don't talk about chicken kits at all. Or they're human-derived kits. Folks, chickens are not feathered mammals. Those kits do not work in chickens. So unless you provide me a citation, a publication, or provide the data where you did the preliminary work and showed that those antibodies, the paper's going to be sent back and probably rejected, because I bet you most of the data is based on those kits and the evaluation of those kits. If you don't have it, the paper won't get published. It's important that you prove to us that this is a chicken-based kit, an antibody, et cetera, et cetera. It's a sticking point that we're finding more and more, and we're going to really concentrate on it. Again, results are results. They're not conclusions. That's not where the conclusions need to be. State what you found. That's it. The discussion's coming. The conclusions are coming here. The one thing, again, talking about discussion, what's the impact? What's the impact of your research? What did it prove, disprove? What did it find new? Novelty. There's nothing wrong with saying, if it's true, this is the first time this has been found in the animal. To the best of our knowledge. That's usually what I put in. That at least suggests you went through the literature. Impact is important, no matter how small. We're trying to advance science, not go back. And that means impact. And you will see as you move through your career, impact is more and more and more. And I'm not talking about impact factor, I'm talking about the research. What does it mean for the industry? Because we're all here to help the industry. At least I assume so. Again, novelty, importance, grammar. We have reviewers that love to work on grammar. They will tell you what to fix, and they want to spend the time on it, that's fine. It's not necessary, but the better grammar you have, the less work you're going to have to do on revising.
There's always going to be some similarities, right? And Dr. Kogut and I, we did not compare our notes. So there's going to be a little bit of overlap, but I'll speed through that part just a little bit. But one of the things that I think people need to do is think about where they're going to submit their paper. There are more and more journals that are popping up on the internet that are available for our poultry scientists to publish their poultry work in. But is your primary audience reading those journals? Are those journals being indexed in the citation databases so that your work can be located if they go in and do a search using Agricola, Medline, Web of Science, Google Scholar, any of those? Are those being properly cited so you can see your work? And so I go around and I look at a lot of journals that, I have search engines set up with keywords on Google that sends me a digest once or twice a week with all the papers that have been published recently underneath those words. And I will look at those. And so sometimes I'll see some great papers pop up related to poultry. And I'll think, man, I'd like to read that. I click on it, and it's not in either Poultry Science or JAPR. So automatically it loses credibility, in my opinion, because who reviewed that paper? Did they actually get did they actually get somebody who is an expert in the field from that journal to thoroughly review that? And when we look at those papers, I'm finding more and more of them that I kind of question on whether or not they had the proper review, because I'm finding errors in those papers. And they're errors that I don't think Dr. Kogut would have let slide, and I don't think I'll let it slide, and I'm not sure Dr. Porter would have if they were submitted to his journal, World Poultry Science. So, I mean, there's going to be several authors that they're just not getting the right reviewers to do that. So you need to think about where you're going to be submitting your work. Is it going to be a basic or applied? Obviously I'm thinking, Dr. Kogut's covered Poultry Science. I'm going to be talking about the Journal of Applied Poultry Research. And rather than saying those 4 words over and over again, we're going to call it JAPR. And so we're going to call it JAPR. And so, JAPR is our applied journal. And like Dr. Kogut mentioned towards the end of his presentation, when we're doing a field trial and you're on a farm with 4 houses and you're applying the treatment to a house, your N is what? 1. If you're lucky enough to get enough product to do 2 houses, you've got an N of 2 and you'll have 2 control. And so how do you replicate that? You do multiple flocks. But then you run into problems, right? We've got different breeder ages. Chicks are coming from different breeder hen ages. We're going to get different seasonal effects possibly. So just things to keep in mind that's going to make that. And so JAPR takes this into consideration. That's one of the reasons why it was created, was to give an avenue for that type of research to be published in. So think about which journal you want to apply it in. Like Dr. Kogan said, is the paper internationally applicable? These are both international journals. I get a lot of papers that'll say so-and-so conducted with relation to birds in, I don't know, X country. I don't want to isolate anybody. X country. And so let's just say, I'm going to say it was done in Georgia. We did all this work right there in Georgia. It was in the title of the paper. And we go in and we start reading, and they surveyed everybody there is Georgia, and that's all great and good, but who is that meaningful to? The people that's in Georgia. Is Dr. Emmerich, who's up in Illinois, going to really care to read that paper? We're a lot hotter than they are up there. He gets a lot colder than we do down here in Georgia, so it needs to have an international perspective in order to be able to go into an international journal. And so we do end up with a lot of those. Not sure about Dr. Kogan and poultry science, but I know we get a lot of that in JAPR. And unfortunately, I have to turn them away if they can't put some kind of international perspective that all of our readership will take into consideration when they pull that paper. The target audience. That's why I can't fathom why we would publish papers anywhere else. Who's our target audience? I'm writing to other poultry scientists, poultry veterinarians, poultry nutritionists, poultry immunologists, management physiologists. I'm writing to those people, and the two journals that always come to mind when I do that is going to be Poultry Science or JAPR. And you look at my CV, and I would say probably 98% of it can be found in those two journals. That's just where I publish. A lot of people say, oh, I'm going to choose where I'm going to go based on impact factor. Oh, come on. I mean, I'm not sure what impact changes. I mean, we've seen our citations in poultry science go up. We've seen our submissions go up this past year. If you're in a business meeting yesterday, what happened to impact factor? It went down. What does that tell you about impact factor? It's volatile. Now, if I was going to follow something, it might be site score, because at least it seems to go in a direction that's somewhat meaningful, and it seems to follow the data that's used to generate it, which are the number of citations and the number of submissions. So all of these things are what people tell me. This is how I determine where I'm going to submit my paper. Which journals are going to go to? And that why there is, I'm like, why are you choosing impact factor? I get it. I know why. I've heard the arguments. I've heard the discussions. But again, I'm usually aware of the journal's impact factor, but it doesn't really, I'm looking for who's going to read my paper, and I'm going to be submitting to that. Components of a successful paper. We're going to be, again, I'm going to be kind of repeating a little bit here, but we'll go through it quickly. You're going to have to identify the problem. You're going to have to ask a question. What are you going to do to address that problem? Form a hypothesis. We're going to set up an experimental design. And that means at least do some replication. Even in a field trial, I'm not going to just do one. I'm not going to do one farm with 2 treatment houses and 2 control houses and 1 flock and submit that to the Journal of Applied Poultry Research. I won't do it. Even if I saw a difference there, it could be a one-hit wonder because it'll disappear. It may not be in the 2nd flock or the 3rd flock. And so I always try to do multiple flocks to replicate that somewhat, even though I don't have a lot of control over what's going to be happening on the day-to-day management or environmental control of those houses. We've already talked a lot about analysis and how that plays into it. Dr. Kogan spent quite a bit of time talking about the novelty, making sure that we're contributing new knowledge to it, to our literature and to that knowledge base that we're trying to contribute to. And then there's style and grammar. We got to be able to read the paper. There's got to be a logical flow to that paper that helps the reader understand why you did it, how you did it, why is it important, and what do we take away from that? What are your conclusions? So I'm going to focus on common mistakes. So let's talk about the initial submission. You come up with your paper, you've chosen to send it to Poultry Science or JAPR. What are some of the common mistakes? The most common is it's not formatted according to the guidelines. It just boggles my mind that when people with PhDs, doctorates of philosophy, sometimes people say it's piled high and deeper. I think it's sometimes when I see this, it's permanent head damage. But anyway, they got to be able to read instructions and format the paper according to the journal guidelines. Because if I send my paper to the reviewers, or I send it to a section editor and they pass it on to reviewers and it's not formatted correctly, you know what I get back in the reviews? They don't review the science. They don't review your paper. They come back and they tell me, well, they didn't say description of problem. They had introduction instead of description of problem. Or they did the conclusion section wrong. Or they point out all the formatting errors. And that's not what I wanted them to look at when we asked them to review it. I wanted them to read the science of the paper and tell me how good that paper is and whether it should be accepted into the journal. So last year, 46%, actually no, that was in the first 6 months of last year, 46% of the papers were sent back. That was a terrible year. I was actually starting to get into a dark place, and I had to ask David Busboom, our section editor, to start doing that. I said, because if I see some of these, I'm just going to start rejecting. That's how dark place I was getting. And so he would start sending them back and getting these fixed so that when they came to me, they had all the right sections and formatted correctly. Major headings. Look at your papers. In JAPR, it's going to be a summary. We don't have an abstract. We have a description of problem. We don't have an introduction. We do have materials and methods. We don't have a results section and a discussion section. We have a results and discussion section. We have conclusions and applications. And those, which are specifically stated in the guidelines, is not going to be in paragraph form. It's going to be a numbered list of conclusions and applications. So we want to take a look at that, because when I get a paper that has got introduction, it's got all the other sections, I know it's been rejected from Poultry Science. And now you send it to me. Now, why in the world would I want to take one of Dr. Koget's rejects and publish it in JAPR? So anyway, let's at least make it somewhat likely that we might send it out for review by at least reformatting it for the right journal. And then, of course, there's the references, making sure. The other thing I get is no line numbers. I will not torture. I like my reviewers. If I didn't like my reviewers, I would torture them and send them a paper with no line numbers to review. Because how in the heck do you refer and tell them where the problems are? Introduction, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th, 6th sentence. I'm not going to take time to do that. So using line numbers in there, and most journals do require it, that they should be, you should list your line number. So you say line 238, this doesn't make sense. What are you trying to say here? And they should be continuous. Almost all journals today are going with continuous line numbers from the very first line all the way to the very last chart and table. So we'll make sure we got these continuous line numbers. And of course, we've already talked about poor grammar, and Dr. Koget has already told you about Elsevier's services for non-English speakers. For those of you like me that are still learning the English language, we just got to get friends. Have Dr. Koget, ask him if he's got time to read my paper before I submit it. Other mistakes. We already talked a little bit about this, but it doesn't fall within the scope of the picture. I got the same rabbit. You must have rejected it, and then they turned around and said, well, let's see if Fairchild falls for it. See if they can convince Fairchild that rabbit is poultry. Jason said he loves rabbit eggs. Yeah. So, paper does not include an ethical statement. Again, I have to send it back and make sure that they do have that, because there's no use in me wasting the reviewer's time if they don't have an IACUC committee review of that paper. Otherwise, we can't accept it and publish it. One of the problems in JAPR particularly, and poultry science has got the same thing, I just don't know if it's a big problem or not, is that we have different types of papers. We have a research report. We have an applied research note. We have a review article. We need to know what the differences are between those. I'll have people submit research reports as review articles. I'll have people submit review articles as research reports. And all of the differences in your review guideline for authors is they're all defined there and laid out on what those differences are in those different paper types. So you could choose which one of those and format your paper accordingly, because some of these have different formatting requirements. An applied research note is formatted quite differently from a research report. Be realistic in terms of the time it's going to take to get your review back. Don't submit that paper on Monday and be hounding me on Friday wanting to know, or the following Monday, wanting to know what the status of your paper is. It's going to take some time. And so we take a look here. Submission to the editor-in-chief, it might take 1 to 3 days from the time you submit it before I get it. Depending on what level of processing, if David has to send it back, it might be a week before you submit it and I see it, if he has to send it back to the author to be revised. I try to get it done fairly quickly, so a lot of times I'm going to have hopefully 1 day turnaround time from the time I get it until the time I assign it to a section editor, barring I have enough time to read them all and just do a quick skim. The subject editor to reviewers, they're going to have to take a look at it, find the right reviewers for it, identify those reviewers, invite the reviewers, and so on. And so that's why if you are reviewing, it's important to accept or decline that invitation, because otherwise we have to wait 7 days, and then the system's going to say, okay, well, that person didn't respond, so they sent an uninvite email. But I had to wait 7 days, and now we're going to invite another email. But if you, as a reviewer, if you get that email and you say, I can't do this right now, or it's outside of my area, whatever, decline it, and it lets us know so we go ahead and assign another reviewer and keep the process going. Reviewers to section editors, again, it's going to, we give them 3 weeks to review the paper, and they're going to send that back to us. Those are the good reviewers. We have some, and there's some good reviewers, they're just tardy. But we want them, we have to kind of nudge a little bit to get these reviews back, but we hope people can do it in 21 days or less. Then we got to go back to the section editor is going to look at the reviews. They're going to make a recommendation, reject, accept, revise, major revision, minor revision. They're going to send that back to us, to me, and then I will accumulate all the stuff, all the comments and everything from the reviewers, from the section editor, from myself, and we send it to the author. And at that point, once I send it back to that author there, that next step, I lose control. That author, he does have, he or she do have, somewhere around 21 days to do that. I get a lot of requests. Oh, I've been doing a lot of traveling. I've got teaching, whatever. I need an extra week. Usually I grant it. But it does add to time of your paper getting submitted. Then we got to the paper's revised. It's resubmitted. I send it back to the section editor. They're going to take a look at the revisions. That could take a few days. They get me that. So all of this comes together, and we're looking at, this is just some rough numbers of how long. Now, if everything lines up perfectly, that final decision is going to depend on the number of revisions. Very clearly in that letter that goes back, the revision letter is going to say, address every concern and suggestion that the reviewers have included in this letter. Do you know how many that Dr. Kogut and I get back that we have to send back for a revision number 2 because simply they did not reply to every single reviewer? I know Dr. Kogut's patience is, this much, and he just wants to reject those. And so, but we do try to send them back, but that just extends the length of time it takes to publish that. So we got to be thorough and get it done in that first revision. The record for me in my 3 years of being on as editor-in-chief right now is 35 days. Everything lined up perfectly. Paper came in, I assigned it to SE, they got it to 2 reviewers. Those reviewers, for some reason, didn't have anything to do. They turned it right around in like 2 or 3 days or less than a week. Came back, it did have to have a quick revision. Those authors were on it. They had it back to me in less than 5 days. Section editor approved it. Boom, 35 days. That's the record. That was the record. So it is possible to do these papers quickly when everything lines up. When we get the decision, when he comes out when I make that first decision, we got 3 options. You can accept, reject, revise, which can be a major revision or a minor revision, or reject. After it's rejected, all right, we're done. It's gone, just like Dr. Kogut said. But sometimes I will get recommendations back that do say reject. And as I'm reading this, I'm like going, why are they rejecting it? Because I think every one of these can be addressed. And so I will go back to the SE, and they may talk to the reviewers, and if we can fix it. Now, if it's fundamentally wrong and more experiments are needed, it's rejected. But sometimes we do get some rejections, and I'm like, really? We can't give them a chance to do a revision to see if we can't address that? And so I will do that periodically. If it's out of scope, there's nothing I can do for that. We just got to send those back. Flawed data experimental design, data's analyzed incorrectly, not enough replication. So all of these are issues. So basically, since in my 3 years, I've had 3 papers that have come back from the reviewers after the first initial submission. It went to reviewers, it came back, and both reviewers and the section editor said accept. And the first one I got, I'm like, no way. And so I reviewed that one myself. And lo and behold, they were right. I couldn't find anything, really to challenge them with. So, but I've had 3 papers in the 3-year period now where it has been accepted in the first round of revisions. It's important to respond to the reviewers. Respond to the reviewers. Read that revision email carefully that you get from the editor-in-chief. It needs to be read thoroughly and carefully. For Poultry Science and JAPR, there's 2 steps. One, we want you to take those reviewer comments and suggestions, and I'd like you to paste them back in the beginning of the document, and I want to see a response to each one of those. Even if it just says corrected, done, applied, executed, whatever. I want to know that you've looked at each and every one of those. Some go into more detail. Hey, I explained this. Some might put a rebuttal right there or why they don't think this should be changed. I did have one time a reviewer say, an author put back in there that they weren't sure the reviewer knew which end the egg came out of. But it was a good point. Anyway, good comment. I got a chuckle. But anyway, we want to do that. The other thing we ask is that you highlight your changes. This expedites and makes it easier on the section editor to go through and line up those corrections with your descriptions at the top of the page. This is incredibly helpful whenever we're trying to reformat, get these papers to see if we can go ahead and accept it or if we need to send it back for more revision. Other mistakes, people forget to not highlight it in yellow. And so it is in that decision letter. And they don't address all the suggestions. Or if they did not provide a satisfactory answer. And so try to be thorough whenever you're trying to respond to the reviewer's suggestions. I'm just going to say a few things to the reviewers. I know it's all about publishing, but even reviewing papers, how do you become a reviewer? Some of you are going to probably be graduating here pretty soon. How do you get into the review list? Well, you could contact a section editor if you know them, and maybe a section editor might contact you. You could email Dr. Kogut and I directly, and you could get put on the list that way. Or, if you didn't know, PSA has got a volunteer form, and you go fill that out. And David will review that. David Busby will review that, and he'll let Dr. Kogut and I know whenever we got potential reviewers that have signed up to review, papers in layer management or health and disease. Who can review? Usually we're shooting for somebody with a terminal degree. I mean, we're looking for somebody with their PhD, or a master's, somebody with master's that's done work in the field, they got years of experience. I know several of those that have reviewed papers, and they're very thorough in revision. So we're looking for those people. Can a grad student review a paper? I tend to say it's okay for me as long as they're in their last year of their program and if they work with the section editor. And some of my section editors have done that to get reviewers for the papers. And they worked with that grad student. They felt good with that grad student. And they followed that very carefully. But it was always students that were near the end of their program. So what about me? What do I do for reviews? Do I accept them or review them? Because I get asked to review papers all the time. Well, I focus on the PSA journals. If it's not a PSA journal, I just reject it. I decline. I don't reject it. I just decline the review. Tell them I'm busy enough. I usually say yes to the poultry science journals with two exceptions. I've got people, sometimes I don't think people know what I do because I am not a nutritionist. And it's going to be very seldom that I'm going to agree to review a nutrition paper. And if you send me a paper that's starting to talk about a lot of genes, if it doesn't refer to Wrangler or Levi or something like that, I'm probably not going to be your guy to review that one either. So, but the other thing too is conflict of interest due to relationship with the author. That might be another reason I would do that. Now, I did have a paper that was submitted one time that I was a co-author on, and they erroneously invited me to review the same paper because they saw the corresponding author, they just didn't look to see who the other authors were. And that's easily done. I can see how that mistake might happen. So if you do get asked to review a paper, or if you get into your next job and you are reviewing, you want to focus on the science, the experimental design, and the data analysis. Don't spend so much time on grammar. It's hard for me. When there's mistakes in there, it makes it hard for me to focus on the data too and read it. But I'm not going to waste a lot of time trying to rewrite somebody's paper unless they want to make me a co-author. Then I'll rewrite your paper for you. So we're looking for numbers of replicants, control and statistical analysis. Strong statistics are crucial to determine whether the outcome is going to be robust. And that kind of fits with what Dr. Kogut was saying earlier. This is one of my pet peeves. Do the results support the conclusions? I will go and read the conclusions, and then I go back through the paper to see if they have got, because I've had people that they'll write a great paper, but then their conclusion is something that's basically considered central dogma. I mean, everybody understands it. Yes, the grass is green. Well, except at my house, because no rain, it's brown. But anyway, they'll state things in there as a conclusion that they didn't even test. They didn't even measure it. It's not that it's not true. They just didn't do the work somebody else did. And so I want to make sure that the results do support the conclusions. Is the content accurate? Big thing for reviewers to look at, because I see papers that are misquoted a lot. And sometimes people will quote a paper just because they cited a paper that did the work, but that paper did not actually do the work themselves. Does that make sense? Yeah. So Then respond promptly to invitations. We already talked about that. Show integrity. And I'm not opposed to people. If you read a good paper, tell the author. You know, it doesn't hurt to throw in there and say, hey, this is a good paper. You know, it's a substantial addition to existing literature. I'm okay with saying that. So anyway, those are some of the points that I'd like to cover, kind of added on to what Dr. Kogut had in terms of expectations when you're trying you got to think like a reviewer and think about what are they going to find wrong with my paper? How do I convince that reviewer that my paper should be published? Thank you.